thought after Ellison and Walsh,
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Maybe just, after Ellison, he's got to go back to Walsh right away. I guess I just asked him,
It's hard.
to stay around for, do you believe in your stand or something like that, so then plus it's a flag rank, because that's got to bounce, and it's not, surprising.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get the word as soon as it gets here. So it's Walsh here yet?
No.
But I didn't see what I usually have. I usually do. Yeah, it's hard if you don't know. But I
Can you access your email? Web-based?
Yeah.
Send it to me again.
President Walsh. Hi, I'm Cheryl from Lincoln. Nice to meet you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your prompt arrival this morning. We'll be getting started in just a few moments.
Sit down.
I'm just going to sit down. Excuse me. I just moved those out of the way. Sir, I know I'm Walsh. Nice to meet you.
I wasn't there. Oh.
Señor Solís, ¿están quietos? Por favor,
Yes. I would say we'll start.
Voy a tu computador más rápido y
Okay, we'll start.
espero que ustedes están.
She does.
What's your name? Yeah, they long time, until the 60s. Top 10 national. Is that right? Yeah, this is.
We are on. So like,
Liz, are you ready for a sound check? Or
I'm ready.
Oh, okay.
It's like wages, hours, sourcing.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in just about 2 minutes. We're still waiting for Keith Ellison, Congressman from Minnesota, to arrive. He is our first speaker, but we are going to go ahead and start the program in just another minute. So again, thank you for your patience.
I was. Yeah. But in there.
Okay, sure.
So, I'm a little confused about what
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Yarrow with Oxfam America, and I'm pleased to have everybody here, and I'm very grateful to the Economic Policy Institute for hosting us and working with us on this program. Oxfam, as many of you know, may be best known for its international economic development, relief work over the last 70 years. In more recent years, we've become involved with projects here in the United States to fight poverty, growing inequality, and low-wage work, with projects in the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina, projects with farm workers. And as hopefully all of you got coming into the room, we've released a new survey, a national survey of low-wage workers, which we defined as workers earning less than $14 an hour, and in households with less than 200% of the poverty, incomes of less than 200% of the poverty level. Guy Molyneux from Hart Research, who conducted the poll, will run through the data for you in a few minutes. First off, as all of you know, inequality and low-wage work are growing problems in the United States. The U.S. has become the most unequal rich country in the world, and also, according to the OECD, has a larger percentage of its workforce in low-wage occupations. And as you'll hear from Heidi Shearholtz from the Economic Policy Institute as well, we'll put some meat on that data of how low-wage work in the U.S. has grown, is growing, is accounting for most of the growth in jobs since the official end of the recession. And BLS projections are for some of the fastest growing occupations in the years ahead are low-wage jobs. I will not go into too much detail about who low-wage workers are at this point because we have some great speakers here this morning. And first off, we are very pleased to have a member of Congress and a former member of Congress. To my far right, Representative Keith Ellison, who will speak first, who represents Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. His priorities in Congress are building prosperity for working families, promoting peace, pursuing environmental sustainability, and advancing civil and human rights. Representative Ellison is also chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and serves on the House Financial Services Committee and the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. So thank you, Representative Ellison, for being here. And Representative Ellison will speak first. He will be followed by Representative James Walsh to my immediate right, who represented what's now New York's 24th Congressional District in the House of Representatives for 20 years, from 1989 to 2009. He was a member of the Republican Main Street Partnership and Republicans for Environmental Protection, and in 2006, led 65 Republican members of the House in supporting an increase in the minimum wage. He also served in the Peace Corps, was a business executive, and a member of the Syracuse, New York Common Council. And he is currently the Government Affairs Counsel with the DC office of K&L Gates. And before we get started with the speakers, just a little bit about the format. We have a kind of two-part program here this morning. We have our two distinguished speakers who will be speaking first. We'll then have a short period of Q&A for the speakers. Then we will move into presentations by Heidi Shearholtz and Guy Molyneux showing the data from our survey. And we have a working American. Let's see, Naya Potts, are you in the room? Yes, Naya will come and join us at that point as well to discuss some of the issues facing low-wage workers. So at this point, I'd like to turn to Congressman Ellison.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do the podium or here, whatever your preference.
I guess I think better on my feet. Well, first off, votes might be called as early as 10. So, as the Congressman is well aware, I may have to make a mad dash, but we're going to hang in there as long as we can, and I'm really honored to be here with you today. Thanks to EPI, thanks to all of you, thanks for our esteemed guests. I want to just pose you a question. If you were going to pick one word to describe America, what would that word be? Think of your word. Think of your word. I bet your word is something close to opportunity, possibility, coming up. That's two. Your word has something to do with the idea that your fate is somewhat is in your hands, and that if you work hard, you'll be able to do better. We're not talking about American fantasy, where you're going to hit the lottery and you know all that kind of stuff. But every American has, I believe, the right to dream that they can improve their circumstances, can perhaps own a home if they want to, can have enough money to pay their bills, can retire one day, can hope to support their child, seek higher education. These dreams are within the grasp of this economy if the distribution of wealth is fair. But it's not within our grasp right now for literally millions of Americans who put their shoulder to the wheel every single day. This is a moral outrage, and the conditions and the policy choices that we have made over the last 30 years are creating an America in which that American dream is slipping out of the grasp. Quite frankly, the policies we have been pursuing, and I'm going to talk about a few of them, represent an existential threat to the American middle class. And we better do something about it, because there are rich countries with poor people, and there are poor countries with fabulously rich people. Some of you who had the chance to travel know, you go to Mexico or Brazil or Pakistan, and they got people there richer than your imagination, fabulously wealthy, servants everywhere, sprawling estates. But that's a tiny percentage of the population. Most people are struggling, scraping to survive. Our country has avoided that fate because bold, brave, courageous men and women insisted that we have an economy that's fair where everybody can make it, based on specific, concrete policy choices. They fought against some of the arguments that are being made today. The startling thing about the arguments that are being made today is they've been being made for 100 years. And I mean that. So, what are some of these choices? We could start anywhere. Let's start with taxes. We were told that if you wanted a strong, robust economy, what you needed to do is take money from the middle and the lower end of our economic system and give it to the rich people, because then they would take the money and put it into plant and equipment, and they would take care of us. They would make sure, they would plow that money back into the economy, and we would be better off for it. And we remember the Laffer curve, and we remember the Milton Friedman's economic philosophy, but the net and Greenspan and all the rest. The reality is that history has proven that has failed. When our economy was really running well, 50s, 60s, we had tax rates of 90% in some cases. Now we have some of the lowest tax rates we've ever had, and we have an economy that's not really producing jobs enough to meet the demands of a growing population. When someone like Mitt Romney, who made $20 million and paid 13.9% in taxes, can exist, and someone making 70 grand, busting it out, both members of the both breadwinners in the family working full time, are paying 35% or something in that neighborhood, that's a scandal. And the only reason we tolerate it is because we have been given to the false notion that poor people have too much money and rich people don't have enough money. And if we just give them more, then they will hire us and build plant and equipment to make us all better off. It's not true. Or maybe we could even talk about not taxation policy, but trade policy. My own state of Minnesota has been a tremendous job net loser because of NAFTA. Now they want us to, they told us, we passed South Korea, we're gonna do better off. This country's lost about 40,000 jobs because of it. We passed Colombia Free Trade Agreement. That's not working out for Colombians or Americans. And now we're staring at the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involves more countries than NAFTA, in more areas of our economy than NAFTA. And half the countries in the agreement, we already have trade deficits with them. And we're told we should do this because we've got to flank China. So we should give up the economic interest of the American middle class to a bad trade deal to to compete internationally with China. I think there's better ways to compete. What about investing in our people and our infrastructure like they are? Or we can move on to even education. Education. I think there's about, what I read, and I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong, about $586 billion is spent directly on K-12 education throughout the United States. If somebody has a better number, please give it to me. I hate to labor in ignorance. But it looks to me, over the last 10, 12, 15 years, that somebody rung a dinner bell on American K-12 education and is working night and day to figure out how to siphon off a profit center from it. As we look at we look at for-profit charter schools, which is making, I mean, when hedge fund managers are trying to figure out how to get a slice of the education pie, you know there's a problem. The results of these for-profit charters and these online charters and and all this excessive testing, people make money on those tests. That's a for-profit business to excessively test our children. And at the end of the day, we're cutting teachers, but we're putting more money into these alternative measures when really our educational system is supposed to be training the workforce for tomorrow. I've talked about education, taxation, trade. I could keep going. Let's just talk about a venerated institution like the post office. We literally are ruining the post office. The post office hired Americans on a non-racial basis after the Civil War. The post office hires more veterans than any other, than nearly anyone else. Always has. And in fact, Congress required that they pay pensions forward to the degree that even postal workers who haven't been born yet have got to have their pension covered now. And it has created an inordinate burden on this institution, which has made them run deficits, even though if they didn't have this congressional mandate, they'd probably doing just fine, even given the recession. And yet, we hear calls based on that deficit to privatize the post office every day because, of course, some industry wants to pluck off pieces of it so they can ching-ching. I'm offering a quick survey about just a few key policy decisions that we have been making that are not in the interest of the American people, that don't have any merit when it comes to the public interest. And just a few of these things that we've got to reverse, and we can be on a sustainable path to the American dream. But we've got to understand what's happening. And we've got to understand that there are people who have decided that this drive toward privatization, this drive toward saying government doesn't work, government can't work, government's always wrong, they have ulterior motives. And they're not dealing straight up with you and I. The fact is, there are people clicking their champagne glasses when the sequester went into effect. They were so happy about it. They're not sad about it. They don't want to lift it. President Obama, working hard to try to lift it. Members of Congress doing the same thing. They don't want to lift it. They like it. Because they know that if you shrink government to the size where you can drown in the bathtub, that people who want to pollute, people who want to externalize their costs of their industry, won't have anyone to hold them accountable. It's as simple as that. So I guess what I want to tell you is that there is good news. There really is. Because I can even feel how much of a downer I sound like right now. But there is good news. And the good news is that Americans all over this country are really beginning to take their economic destiny into their own hands. As members of the Progressive Caucus, we were honored to be able to partner with workers who work for low-wage industries that are fabulously wealthy, by the way, and highly profitable, but the workers are making $7.25 an hour. One of the groups that the Progressive Caucus partnered with were workers who worked for federal contractors. And according to another great think tank known as Demos, the federal government funds more low-wage jobs than Walmart or McDonald's combined. These are both wildly profitable companies, and yet the people who fry the chicken and make the hamburgers get next to nothing. But this is taking place not only in DC, but it is taking place in DC too, and it's taking place at the Air and Space Museum, at the Ronald Reagan Building, it's taking place at the Union Station, but it's taking also place in Milwaukee and in New York and in Minneapolis and in Duluth, Minnesota, and all over this country. Low-wage workers saying, we've had enough and we're not going to take it anymore. As members of Congress and even the president are calling to increase the minimum wage, and we're stuck in a political environment where it's very difficult to do that, low-wage workers are saying, well, we're striking. Good luck with that. We hope you win. But if you do or if you don't, we're going to use our ability to withhold our labor to demand that we get a better slice of the profits of this company. After all, if we don't make the chicken and we don't clean up these restaurants and we don't secure them and we don't serve these people, you don't make any money. So do right by the people who do right by you every day. Also, as calls for fixing the debt are heard around the Congress, and we're told that the only way to fix that debt is to cut Social Security and other key programs, Americans, seniors, but not just seniors, disabled veterans, and people all over this country are rallying to saying no. Change CPI is a cut. I was standing with workers yesterday, seniors and others yesterday in front of the White House, where they were saying, you're not going to balance the budget on our shoulders. We're in this situation because of two unpaid for wars, unpaid for Medicare Part D, unpaid for tax cuts, not because of Social Security, and you're not going to, re-impoverish seniors in this generation to solve the problem. The Americans are saying no, and all over this country, people are doing this, and Congress has got to catch that wind. And I believe that more and more you will find people demanding that this economy, which is a built, created social institution, not an act of nature. You understand? The economy's not like a storm. The economy is like a train. We built it. We can slow it down. We can speed it up. We can put more seats in it. But we've got to be willing to do that. And I just want to wrap up by saying this. I love this country, and I know you do too. And it shames me a little when I read that there are other countries in this world that have greater economic mobility than the United States. America should have, and sorry for sounding a little patriotic, but America should have the strongest economic mobility in the world. It should not have the greatest inequality in the world. America should have an economy that works for everybody. And we need to put labor policies, trade, taxation, healthcare policies in place to make it so. We can do this. It is within our ability to do, but we've got to do it now. And we're not lacking for great policy ideas. What we're lacking for is organization and grit and willingness to stand up. Do I have even a minute left? I'm done? Okay, I'm done. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Representative Ellison.
You guys give me a time thing or I just keep going.
Tell us time has expired.
That I understand.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to thank EPI and Oxfam for giving me this opportunity to be here with you today. Louder?
Not you.
Oh, okay.
Come up a little bit.
Okay, so, and I apologize right at the outset because I'm going to have to read a lot of this because I wrote it last night. I don't have speechwriters anymore, and I don't have, all the technology that I used to have. So bear with me, but I do consider it a real honor to be here. I was asked to try to explain to you how best to work with Republicans in the Congress. And I suspect I'm one of the few Republicans here. I am a Republican. Some would consider me a conservative. Some would consider me moderate. I suppose some people may even consider me a liberal on some things. But I am a Republican, and I think like one. And so what I'd like to do is sort of talk about some of the values that I think Republicans have, and then talk about the government's role and how to get partnerships and bipartisan opportunities with the congressman's colleagues, my former colleagues in the Congress. In my 60 years, 60 plus years of life, and much of that in public life, 31 years in public life, I was a city councilman, city council president, member of Congress. My dad was a mayor and a member of Congress. I have never seen a situation where a job was advertised and somebody didn't show up. We'd advertise 5 fireman positions, we get 250 applications. We'd advertise 50 summer jobs for parks for kids, we get 1,000 applications. So, people want to work. They want to work. There's no question about that. They want to take control of their own destiny. They want a better life for their kids than they had for themselves. Rich or poor, that's what people want. Americans or Nepalis, where I lived, where I worked in the Peace Corps, they want the same things. It's universal. Yeah, there are some slackers. We all know some slackers. But by and large, people want to work, and they want to work hard, and they want to control their own destiny. I worked, after Peace Corps I came back, I worked in social services for a couple of years, so I had a caseload, AFDC cases they used to refer to them as. There were women with dependent children. I know that the people that I worked with on public assistance did not want to be there. They did not. They don't want a handout. They have pride. They want to earn their way. And they want to have good things in life. We need to have that opportunity society that Congressman Ellison mentioned. And I think opportunities, that's the word that jumped to my mind, for sure. We need to have a hopeful society. Our nation can only maintain its greatness if people believe that they have a shot at success, at financial independence, at a bright future. Otherwise, there is no hope. How do we give people a sense of hope in every corner of our nation? People in rural America, people in inner cities, people north, south, east, and west. It won't be easy because, based on the poll that's recently been provided to all of us, people don't believe that there's equal opportunity anymore. That the system's rigged. That it's easier to fall back than it is to go forward. First, let me say, the Congressman mentioned a dream. There was another great American who talked about a dream, Dr. Martin Luther King. You can't just have a dream. You have to work it. And remember, Dr. Martin Luther King was a PhD. He spent his life working hard to get that degree. He lived his example every day, was working toward that dream. And in spite of all the trouble, the arrests, the insults, the frustration, he continued to work toward that dream. And while he died tragically, that incredible sacrifice helped to enable that dream. So hard work is still a very important entity. No matter how frustrated, no matter how underemployed, no matter how unappreciated or how poorly compensated people are, hard work is a value. One of my sons qualifies as a working poor, member of the working poor. And he's working his butt off. I know he is. And he wants to get ahead. And I think he will. I hope he will. But, for some, it just doesn't come as easy as it does for others. Education is perhaps the most important ingredient. As an individual, that's our first most important responsibility as a parent, getting our kids focused and disciplined to study and learn and love to learn. I think that's a parent's most important job. Loving them is teaching. Making good decisions, good choices in life is critical. Keeps us from getting boxed in later in life. Keeping our options open by avoiding trouble and playing by the rules is one of the best ways to ensure good work opportunities. Some of us, some of our kids learn the hard way, but hard work, education, good choices works for most. If we do all these things, and still society won't give us a break, then the government has some responsibilities. Job training, community colleges, student aid, student loans. These are the things the government should do to support your initiatives. Medicaid, Social Security Disability, community health centers, food stamps, public assistance. These are for when you fall backward, when you're trying to get ahead and you stumble, and your dream doesn't immediately come into focus. Government has a responsibility to provide that support. Medicare, Social Security, this is a return on your investment for hard work throughout your life. As a Republican member of Congress, I supported all these programs, as did the vast majority of my colleagues, both parties. I believe that is still the case in both parties. No one wants to suffer. No one wants people to suffer. Most people contribute to charity, whether they're conservatives or they're progressives. We all want the world to be a better place. Yes, there is a small majority who think that people on welfare are just slackers. Obviously, they've never met or known or spoken with anyone receiving public assistance, because that's just not the case. But I think that most conservatives, indeed most people, they don't want waste, fraud, and abuse. They want their tax dollars properly spent and well spent and beneficially and efficiently spent. So what about Washington today? I think what happens is complex issues are reduced to sound bites, lines drawn in the sand. On the right, you get quotes like 50% of the people are takers. On the left, you hear conservatives are heartless haters who want to take food from the mouths of babies. Both are wrong. Both statements are absolutely wrong. But those are the lines that get drawn in the sand. And there are, as you know, there are interest groups on both sides, progressive side, conservative side, who are out there fighting for their ideas. And members of Congress sometimes get caught in between. So much of what's going on today in Washington is reduced to sound bites. Members of Congress, by and large, are good, decent, honest, hardworking people. Just as much as the country at large is described the same, people in this room are described the same. Congress really does indeed reflect the nation. You'll never read in the paper that members of Congress are good, honest, decent, just, kind, hardworking people. But the press doesn't get your attention by praising Congress. Part of the problem on Capitol Hill, I think, is the country is hurting. It's tough. The economy is poor. Revenues aren't coming to the country. Just as in your home, if you have a good year and you have money in the bank and the bills are paid, life is a lot easier. Same with the government. When revenues are coming in, when the economy is good, when unemployment is down, when people are in control of their own destiny, government's a lot easier. But when things are tough economically, it's a lot tougher to govern. And part of the problem now is that both parties have ideas about how to fix it. But they're different ideas. And, unless you live in a dictatorship, the only way to get anything done is compromise. If you have a dictatorship, the dictator says, this is what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. In this country, the only way things get done are through compromise. And, there are some in my party who just don't like government. Okay, but the absence of government is anarchy. And we just had a little taste of that a few weeks ago. And I think some of those folks who didn't like government so much are now thinking, maybe, just maybe, government does have a role to play. And so, and you know, something else to keep in mind is 45% of the House of Representatives has 2 terms experience or less. So they don't really even know a lot of what regular order is. 45% of the Congress, hundreds of members of Congress have been there for 3 years or less. So, you know, they're learning. And part of your job is to help teach them. As I said, the key to any solution is bipartisanship. Nothing good ever happens in Washington without some component of bipartisanship. And I think that's maybe almost even a fact. I know it's an observation, but it's pretty close to fact. It does exist today, but the problems are big. I know members of Congress, both sides, who get together, talk about issues, talk about solutions, try to find common ground. There's a lot of show horses in Congress that you see on TV, on talk shows, and then there are a lot of workhorses that you don't necessarily see on TV every day. But they are trying. The problem is compromise right now seems to be a dirty word. Your charge, I guess, is to try to put a human face on these problems and let members know that people are working as hard as they can and just can't get ahead. That the economy needs to grow to create more demand for workers, to put more people on that economic train that the Congressman talked about. That job training has to be supported by the government so that people who lose jobs or who are underemployed can get the next better job. That a social safety network of food, housing, and health care is essential when people have a crisis, lose their job, or have a serious illness. Part of the problem is that the government doesn't do all things well. Some programs are poorly run and poorly managed. As you know, these get the headlines and wind up as red meat in politicians' speeches. We need to be thoughtful, persistent, my mother would say polite, patient advocates. Persistence may be the most important quality of all. I found in my career, once 9 years to get a bill passed. 9 years. That kind of mitigates against term limits, but persistence is really important in politics and policy development. Point out to your representatives that they have thousands of people living in their constituencies who are having a hard time making it, and they're working as hard as they can, and they don't have the opportunities to move up that everybody in this country should have. Present them with the facts. Take them to food banks, shelters, job training programs, community colleges, community health centers. And when they go, show them the faces and the lives and the frustrations and the challenges of the working poor. Offer bipartisan solutions. Elicit and develop heroes, champions in both parties. Don't suggest that only government holds the key to solving these problems, but has to play its part along with individuals, the private sector, churches, and educational institutions. Be creative. Show them that $1 of federal money can often leverage $10 in the private sector. Whether it's $10 in investment in education, or it's job training, or it's transitional living services, and find advocates and partners in the private sector who will work with you to help spread that federal money farther. Don't be afraid to support changes in existing government programs to improve them. John Boehner, the speaker, at one time was the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee. He's a strong proponent of job training programs. On his watch, much of the duplication and redundancy in our occupational training programs was eliminated. Programs were improved and connected so that they were clear goals, clear oversight, and results-oriented. Many in the progressive community attacked him as a slash-and-burn conservative. But in hindsight, many of these reforms did indeed work and improve those programs. Find people you can work with. As a former Peace Corps volunteer myself in a food production program in the Third World, and a member of the Agriculture Committee, and later the Ag Appropriations Committee, I was a natural advocate for nutrition programs. So I was sought out by groups like Bread for the World, Results, FRAC, and others, and we worked together. We identified other Republicans and Democrats who were like-minded, or at least inclined to help, and we went out and tried to get them involved. There are still members of Congress with whom you can work, in both parties. Remember the persistence part. Stay away from dogma. Don't assume the worst in people. Assume the best. Usually, that's what you'll get. Help create bipartisan working groups. Thank people publicly. The results group was great at that. If I did something that they liked, you'd think I walked on water afterwards. And you know, sometimes you're asking people in public life to take a risk to support a program, so thank them. Make sure that they know it's appreciated. Do support blogs and letters to the editor, or talk shows, or show up at the town hall meeting and press your case and thank them for listening. Lastly, let me just say, it's part of the game here in Washington, but I hated it, and that's questioning people's motivation. There are people of good heart and good faith in both parties. Some people are deeply religious, who care very much about their fellow human beings. They just come at it from a different point of view. Question their votes, question the results of their ideas, but try not to question people's motivation. That only gets you in a negative circle. So, my wife said not to be too preachy. I hope I wasn't, but if I was, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, both Congressman Ellison and Congressman Walsh. You know what the feedback is here. We have a pretty full program here today, and we're running a little bit behind, but I think, you know, we're very privileged to have a thoughtful Democrat and a thoughtful Republican on the same stage addressing an issue that is clearly of enormous importance to the future of the country. We can't have a country where more than a third of workers are earning low wages, 26 million less than $10 an hour, another 33 million between $10 and $14 an hour. But before we turn to Heidi and Guy for a further piece of the program, I'd like to open this up to the audience for just a couple minutes of questions for both members of Congress. Yes?
Hi, Congressman, you both talked about the issue of leverage and privatization of government services and government resources, two sides really of the same coin. Privatization, it seems, is an inefficient way to go about using the private public dollars, because why in the world would a private entity want to perform a public good unless there was something really in it for them? So my question is, why does government so often just seek to privatize services as opposed to really using public dollars to leverage the private sector to actually perform public good? It seems that if you just dump it off, you're just simply giving up on the opportunity of providing a public good and allowing the company to reap all of the financial resources. But if you use leverage, on the other hand, you actually can accomplish both things at once. So if you just both speak to that.
And I think since Republicans are probably more likely to support that approach, I probably ought to respond first. There are certain things that government can do that the private sector can't do. And I always kind of laugh at, chuckle about people who come into government and say, we're going to make government run like a business. It can, because it has different motivation. But, you know, the private sector, it's the profit motive, and I don't see anything wrong with profit. I mean, I think that's what really creates our economy, makes things work. If it's not regulated properly, it can be a bad thing. But profit's a good motive for things. But, you know, whether it's private sector or government sector, I think what Republicans think is that the private sector can run things better, is more efficient, better managed, and so on. And in many cases, that's true. But there are aspects of government that cannot be run like a business, should not be run like a business, and shouldn't be determined their success based on someone else's profit. So, I mean, I think we have to be open. We've seen, you know, private sector, Congressman mentioned charter schools. I think the jury's still out on charter schools. I was actually chairman of the House of Representatives DC subcommittee on House appropriations when I first got on the Appropriations Committee. That was when we set up the Financial Control Board, and boy did I get crucified for that. Every morning in the Washington Post and the radio stations. But what I really thought we should try to do is make improvements in the school district, because at the time there weren't enough books for kids. The bathrooms were locked because they were broken and they were flooded, and staircases were blocked off because they weren't making repairs, and the stairs were dangerous. And so, I mean, I think the motivation was right, and I think the result for the city of Washington was good. I mean, I think the city has benefited since then. And the charter schools came in at that time, and people more and more are opting for them. So it's a choice, because the public schools were failing, clearly failing in the District of Columbia, and people were ready for another option, and this was seen as an option. Now, you know, when hedge funds start investing in charter schools, I agree with you. I mean, what's going on here? They couldn't be, hedge funds only want 40% profit. They don't want 10% profit or 5%, they want 40. So I'm not sure that's the right place for them, but I do think that charter schools, if they perform well and people get a bang for the buck and their kids get a better education, why not?
You know, Christian, the question you asked, I think, is really important, and we need to spend more time thinking about it. How do the public and the private sector interact in a mutually beneficial way for the ultimate benefit of the public? This is a very good question, because I think just the naked privatization move has been a failure, and we should call it an experiment that didn't work out. I actually agree with Congressman Walsh's point when he says that it's the profit motive, and I agree. I'm a small business owner. I don't have any problem with profit either. I just think that when you have environmental factors to consider, when you have other public interest factors to consider, and you reject all of them only for pursuit of profit, then you run into problems. But I think that you're right. There is a way for the public and the private sector to work together, but we have not figured out exactly the best way for that to happen. When it comes to, say, like education, there may be a role. I actually don't have a problem with charters per se. I have a problem with for-profit charters. I have a problem with K-12 online charters. Because when I was in high school, man, you tell me I don't have to go to school? Come on now. Oh, and by the way, they want the same amount of money, even though they don't have buildings to clean, they don't have teachers to they have some teachers to pay, not, fewer. They don't have athletic teams, they don't have bands, and yet they want the same money. So that's why they're wildly profitable. So I think we've got to figure out how we do it. But a charter, even an online K-12 charter for kids with disabilities might work. But you've got to do it thinking about what you're trying to do, and the public good has got to always be that star you're aiming for. So I think that it makes sense to really drill down on how we do that. I got a bill called the National Infrastructure Bank Bill. And this is a bill where the government would put some capital seed money down to capitalize the bank, and then would float bonds from it, which would be coming from the private sector, and then use the money to do regionally critical infrastructure investment. Now that might work, but like, look at the military. Just going to say, Halliburton, you guys do it. It didn't work. Privatizing our military didn't work, right? Oh, in prisons, you are begging for trouble when the public interest is not the sole and only function of the prison. Because if you build them, they will come. And we've had scandals where even judges have been corrupted into sending people to incarceration just because they had to fill that place because it was a profit-making entity. So I don't want to go on too long. I just think you ask an intriguing question, and it calls for a whole lot more thought than we've given it so far.
Thank you. I guess one very quick question before we move on to hearing from Heidi and Guy and from Naya Potts, hearing about the experiences of low-wage workers. But if there's a quick question with quick answers, and I hope both of our members can stay for Heidi's and Guy's and Naya's presentations. But a very quick question. I think there was one. Or Debbie?
I don't know how quick this is. Debbie Weinstein, Coalition on Human Needs. I'll start with following Representative Walsh's advice, and thank you for your work as an appropriator over the years, because we always found that even though we didn't always agree, we could talk, and your staff was interested in learning about what we tried to bring. In that context, we've got a situation where there's been an 18% cut in domestic appropriation since 2010. In the context of today's meeting, not enough jobs, people not trained for what jobs there are. How can we break through to the people in Congress who are at least open, as you were, to learning and acting on that, so that we can go back to investing and not only thinking about how much more we can cut?
Well, this deficit is really, it's driving a lot of this. Republicans are conservative primarily financially, I think, although, some are very social conservatives too. I really think that when the stimulus bill that President Obama introduced when he first became president, if that had been an infrastructure bill, building America, building roads, bridges, infrastructure, water conveyances, dams, airports, ports, he would have got a lot of Republican support for that. If I was there, I would have voted for it, and I know a lot of other members who would have. I think he probably could have got 40, 50 votes for that. And if, this is, it's old history, right? So, but I think that got off on the wrong foot. And so now you've got, the debt seems to be, the annual deficits are going down. The debt continues to rise, of course. The annual deficits are going down, which is a good thing. I mean, what we've got to do is get this economy growing. We can't cut ourselves into prosperity. We just can't. And
Bipartisan here, guys.
all right, now this is where it may end, but the discretionary budget has been cut too much. But the entitlement programs are not efficient. They are not, Congress has no control over the entitlement programs. They're run on autopilot. So when my dad was here back in the 70s, more than 50% of the budget was discretionary, so Congress could control that. And the Appropriations Committee, under every president, Republican or Democrat, has delivered a budget that costs less than what the president wanted. Now, I know I'm talking too long, and I want Congressman. It's not an easy answer, okay? But you've got to get people, especially members of Congress, out to meet people, to see their districts, to understand what's happening. And the only people who can do that are the people who live in those districts. And you got to prevail upon them in their desire to represent everybody.
Well, Congressman Walsh, yeah, this will be familiar to you. I was just told by my staff that we're on, that the vote's on.
Okay.
So I gotta hit the door.
Get the last word.
So what I'd like to say is that I actually don't have a problem with finding efficiencies in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs. But I do have a problem, particularly when we are in a retirement crisis, cutting benefits to seniors, particularly when people's savings are down because of flat wages, particularly because their 401ks have, well, they recently got a bump, but they've been in the toilet for a while. And so I really got an issue with that. We got a $6.6 trillion gap between what people need for retirement and what people have. And boy, this is gonna be an issue we've got to deal with. So I think we you know, and then the other thing is Social Security. I mean, we often say Social Security has not caused the deficit. While that is 99.99% true, there is some wonky people who could say, well, if you think about this and that, okay, fine. But you can't ever claim that Social Security has caused this massive debt that we have. This long-term debt, that is caused by these tax cuts, which, and again, I'm not even against tax cuts. I'm against tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans in a way that creates structural deficits. But, you know, if you have a middle-class tax cut that might boost demand here and there, I'm open to the conversation. But I'm not open to the conversation of, you know, somebody, you know, paying 50% on all their money when regular working people are paying 35 and 39%. It's just wrong. So with that, I want to say, please continue this conversation. I love EPI, and you guys are the best. And it's been an honor to be with you today.
My pleasure, sir.
And you all, thank you very much. I wish I could hear the rest of the presentation.
Appreciate it. Now we're going to turn to Heidi Shearholtz. Heidi is an economist with EPI, has researched and spoken widely on issues of the economy, economic policy affecting low-wage workers, has written a great deal, appeared in the media, testified before Congress. So, presentation by Heidi.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to keep this quick to turn this over to Guy as soon as possible, who has this great survey to cover. But what I'm going to do quickly is give you the economic context. Where is this survey taking place? What's sort of the larger picture? In 2008 and 2009, this economy lost 8.7 million jobs in the worst recession that we had seen in 70 years. But we started adding jobs in March of 2010. We've been adding jobs for more than 3.5 years. Are we back? Are things fine now? Unfortunately, not even close. This is where I'm going to be even more pessimistic than Keith. This line shows the total number of jobs in the economy. You can see us falling off a cliff. We are still 1.5 million jobs below where we were when the recession officially started in December 2007. But that really understates how deep the hole is, because the population is growing all the time. We actually need to add jobs every single month just to hold steady, just to keep up with the growth in the potential labor force. We should have added 6.5 million jobs over the last 6 years. So we are 8 million jobs in the hole. We need 8 million jobs to get back to the pre-recession unemployment rate. But how does this, that shows we're still in this huge hole, jive with, skipping that one, this is the unemployment rate over time, and it shows that we have actually made substantial improvement in the unemployment rate since the worst of it. So a couple of things about this plot. This is the current unemployment rate, 7.3%. It's still even this unemployment rate is still far higher than it was during the worst of the early 2000s recession. So here, 6.3% was the worst the unemployment rate ever got in the early 2000s downturn. But it's made a lot of improvement. The unemployment rate was 10% in the fall of 2009, now it's 7.3%. So does at least this mean that we're in a robust jobs recovery? Again, the answer is a resounding no. Most of that improvement was not for good reasons. Most of that improvement was not happening because unemployed workers were finding work. Most of it was happening because of discouragement. You have to be actively looking for work to be counted as unemployed. There are around 5 or 6 million workers who have dropped out of or never entered the labor force because job opportunities are so weak. This plot shows, so that the light blue line, the one below, that's the unemployment rate for a shorter time frame, but it's exactly the one on the previous slide. The taller line is what the unemployment rate would be if those missing workers were in the labor force looking for work. The unemployment rate would be over 10% right now. And just because we might get questions on this, that little blip up in the very last month is probably an anomaly. There was weird data things related to how furloughed government workers were counted during the October survey. So I don't think it's as high as 10.8%, but if you just look at September numbers, it's 10.2%. So there's just, if we count those missing workers, we still have a ton of, we've seen very little improvement in the labor market since the worst of the downturn. I'm gonna, I'll talk about this one. I'll skip that one. One way to really dig into a couple of issues that come up around this is to look at the number of job openings. BLS calculates the number of job openings every month, and you can look at them by industry. Those dark blue lines show the number of job openings we have in this economy by industry. The light blue lines show the number of unemployed workers by industry. So there's 2 points I think this chart makes. One, unemployed workers vastly outnumber job openings. There are going to be millions of unemployed workers out there no matter what they do, no matter how great their resumes are, no matter how skilled they are, because the job openings just aren't there. And then the other thing this underscores is our high unemployment today isn't about skills. Unemployed workers outnumber job openings in every single industry. There's no industry where workers could go where jobs are plentiful. So what we see is that the high unemployment that we see today is just due to a broad-based, weak demand for work to be done. It's not because workers don't have the right skills for the sectors where the jobs are available. And then quickly to move to what more related to what Guy's going to be talking about, this persistent high unemployment, this weak labor market puts huge downward pressure on wage growth. There's a very tight relationship between high unemployment and low wage growth, and you do not have to be an economist to understand the intuition. It's exactly what you would think. In a period of high unemployment, employers do not have to pay big wage increases to get and keep the workers they need when workers don't have outside options. It just shifts the bargaining power away from workers. And we see that actually across the wage distribution. Even high wage workers see lower wage growth when unemployment is high, but the effect is way worse for middle wage workers and even worse for low wage workers. So low wage workers have been hit really hard by this downturn, have seen their wages really crushed. But what I want to show you now is that stagnant wages for people at the middle of the distribution and on down is not a new phenomenon in the Great Recession and its aftermath. It's been going on since the 70s. And this is my last slide before I turn it over to Guy. This shows just real hourly wages, so adjusted for inflation, for 10th percentile workers and 50th percentile workers by gender. Because I know not everyone stares at numbers like this all day, every day, let me just briefly explain what a percentile is. Percentile is when you line everyone up by what their wages are, lowest to highest. The 10th percentile person is the person who makes more than 10% of people and less than 90% of people. So they're low-wage workers. The 50th percentile, that's the median, that's the typical person. That's the person who has more than half of of workers, they make higher wages than half and lower wages than the other half. So what we see, the backdrop of this thing is massively rising productivity over this period. Productivity rose 75% over this period. So the economy was getting richer. We were growing. What you see here is that those riches, that economic growth, was not reaching middle or low income people over this period at all. Their wages are totally stagnant. You can put, if you put up the wage growth of people higher up the income distribution, I didn't include them on here because it stretches out the y-axis so much you can't even see what's going on because their wages are so high and growing so fast. But the point is that the huge economic growth we saw over these 35 years was just not reaching down the income distribution or the wage distribution in this case. It was being captured by a small sliver at the top. And to just focus quickly in on 10th percentile workers, the low-wage workers, 10th percentile men, despite huge economic growth over this period, make 10% less now than they did in 1979. 10th percentile women make 4% less now than they did in 1979. And I will now turn it over to Guy to talk about what this means to the living standards of these workers.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Representative Walsh, for being here today. I'd also like to ask two of our workers here in the audience to come up, Naya Potts and Tiffany Broyd, if they could. Guy Molyneux is a partner with Hart Research Associates. He's researched and spoken widely on done research and focus group research for nonprofits, government agencies, political campaigns. He was polling director for CNN. We at Oxfam America commissioned Hart Research to look at the experiences, attitudes, beliefs, desires of low-wage workers throughout the country. So turn it over to Guy.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So what we have done for Oxfam is conduct a telephone survey with a sample of national sample of 804 low-wage workers across America. The criteria for inclusion in the survey were you had to make less than $14 an hour if you're employed. In addition, the vast majority of these respondents lived in households with incomes below $40,000 a year, and the large majority of them have incomes that would be below 200% of the poverty level for their household. The large majority were employed full-time or part-time. There is about 10% of our respondents were unemployed, but reported to us that the last job they had, they made less than $14 an hour, and so we considered them to be part of the low-wage workforce since their most recent job was a low-wage position, and they were looking for work again right now. The margin of error for the results, plus or minus 3.7%. Let me just start by talking about the sort of financial, economic situation low-wage workers face, and then talk a little bit about their experience at work. And then a little bit at the end about what kinds of policy responses might make a difference in the lives of these low-wage workers. Not surprisingly, low-wage workers give us a reasonably bleak portrait of their financial situation today. About 6 in 10 tell us that they and their family are either just meeting their expenses day to day or not even able to meet their expenses. Only 14% feel they are living comfortably. These are somewhat subjective measures, right? That is, they describe their situation as comfortable. Just to give you a sense of how that compares to the country as a whole, the Pew organization asked this same question back in December. 35% felt they were just meeting their expenses or not even doing that economically. So you can see the gap here. And really this gap almost certainly understates the actual difference in financial experiences, because as I said, people are using their own standards to answer it. So when they say I'm just meeting basic expenses, the word basic is somewhat dependent on how each person answers it. And to give you a sense, in the same survey, we asked low-wage workers how much money they thought it took for a family to sort of just get by and meet basic needs today. Their answer was $37,000 for a family of four. But if you ask the American public that same question, the answer is $50,000. So low-wage workers actually sort of set the bar of what they need quite a bit lower than a middle-class respondent would in the survey. So these results probably understate the real difference in financial experience between the two groups. The earlier speakers talked a lot, particularly Representative Ellison, about the idea of America as a place where one can rise up and has an opportunity to succeed, to do better than your parents, to improve one's financial situation. What low-wage workers describe is a very different reality today. We asked them, which do you think happens more often today? So they're talking about their own personal experience, but also about the communities they live in. Is it more common today for someone from a low-income background to rise into America's middle class, or is it more common for a middle-class person to fall out of the middle class? These results were really staggering to me. By a ratio about 6 to 1, people said, 76% said it's more common now for people to fall out of the middle class into a low-income situation as opposed to rise up and improve their situation today. We also see in the survey that many of our respondents are themselves, in a sense, downwardly mobile. In addition to the 10% who don't have a job today, another 52% are employed but tell us that their current wage is less than they have made in a job in the past. So are earning less today than they themselves have made in a prior job. So to give you a sense of people really moving downward rather than upward in their lives. Another thing that the survey paints a rather clear picture of is that being a low-wage worker today means never being able to escape worry about your financial future. These bars on this slide are the percentage of low-wage workers who tell us that they worry either frequently or sometimes about each of these following, each of the economic hazards or problems that are mentioned here. The single most common concern was they will not have enough money to be able to retire someday with any kind of security. 88% worry that they will not have retirement security. 82% worry about having health care expenses that they and their family can't afford. 80% worry about job loss, and nearly the same percentage about not being able to pay for their children's education. This response from people who have children. A big concern of low-wage workers who are parents is the economic future for their children. It's an even more powerful concern, I think, than the concern they have for themselves. 57% of the low-wage workers, for example, say it's important that they would like to someday get a college degree, but 81% say it's an important goal that their child be able to get a college degree someday. And 89% feel it's important that their children be better off financially than they are. So a lot of focus on their children's economic situation in terms of their ambitions and goals, but a lot of concern about what the opportunities will be for their children. Many have already had to make personal sacrifices in order to get by economically, and many have also had to rely on public services and public assistance of various kinds. 37% say they have had to postpone education or training because they could not afford it. Terrible sort of paradox, right, for low-wage workers who are striving to improve their situation, who see education and training as an important step in doing that, and yet cannot find financially a way to acquire that additional training or education. A third have had to sell or pawn personal possessions just to meet their bills and to make ends meet. 29% have received food stamps in the past 2 years, a quarter financial support from families or friends, and the same percentage have relied on public provision of health care. Overall, 52%, a majority of our respondents, had relied on some kind of public assistance in the previous 2 years. And that number was considerably higher for those earning particularly low wages. One, I think, of the myths held by many people about people with low wages and low incomes is that they are unwilling to work hard enough to change their situation. The survey reveals a very powerful work ethic among low-wage workers. We asked them to rate a number of different life goals, eight different goals. I've referred to a couple of them in terms of, for example, having your child be able to get a college education someday. The single highest rated one was performing my job well. That is the single highest ambition of these low-wage workers. So just to give you a sense of their dedication to performing their job well. 64% work 40 hours a week or more. 30% of those who have a job are working more than 40 hours a week, and about 1 in 6 are working more than one job. Looking at their job situation more specifically, we've looked at their family financial situation. If we look at their work situation, we asked them about whether certain kind of problems that workers sometimes encounter apply to them, are problems for them. Low wages, not surprisingly, given the selection criteria here for being a low-wage worker. Low wages is the single biggest problem they identify. 59% say that low wages is a serious problem in their job today. But also about half tell us that stress on the job from their work demands is a problem. A lot of people talk about not having promotion opportunities, so again, this desire to move up, to improve one's situation being thwarted. 42% don't have promotion opportunities. A third cite a lack of opportunities for education or training that might qualify them for either a promotion where they work or a new position from another employer someday. So you can see the barriers that are in the way for many of these workers. Many not able to get as many hours of work as they want. Among low-wage women, a lot of concern they cannot get time off to care for a family member and also meet their job responsibilities. But perhaps the greatest shortcoming in these jobs lies in the area of benefits. Not only are we talking about people trying to get by on $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour in wages, these jobs in many cases also don't have the benefits that most middle-class Americans take for granted as part of sort of your package as an employee. These are the percentages who say they do not get each of these benefits at work. A majority say they do not get any paid sick leave. A majority do not have a retirement plan either at all or at least not one that their employer contributes to. So they are totally on their own to try to save for retirement, which on these wages, as you can imagine, is a difficult to impossible task. 44% get no paid vacation, 41% no health insurance, and 3 in 10 get none of these benefits, no benefits of any kind to go with their low wage. You can imagine the challenges that pose to those kind of workers, and you can see that here on this next slide, where we've divided our survey sample into the low-wage workers who receive none of those 4 core job benefits, and the 70% who at least get one or more of those benefits. How often do you worry about having health expenses you can't afford? 3/4 if you're in one of these no-benefit jobs. Relying on public assistance, look at this huge gap. 63% of those who are in the no-benefit jobs compared to 38% of those who have at least some benefits. What you can see there dramatically is how some of these low-wage jobs are really being subsidized by taxpayers, essentially. The employers are providing no benefits, and public assistance has to try to fill some of that gap. The worries about debt, not having time for your family, all of them greatly exacerbated if you're in one of these jobs that don't provide benefits. All of the low-wage workers we've interviewed here face what certainly most Americans would call very serious financial challenges, but certain groups face distinct difficulties. One that kind of jumped out at us from the data were low-wage workers who are relatively older, 50 and over is the group we've looked at. They are really a group that's really downwardly mobile in a very serious way in many cases. 57% say they've earned more at a prior job. They're much more likely than the younger workers say that their family is worse off than it was 5 years ago. 55% of them say that. And they worry frequently about retirement because obviously it's not that far away, or at least I should say the goal of retiring is not far away in years. The reality may be that they cannot retire. And they've lost the optimism that younger people have, even those who make very low wages. We see young people still have a fair amount of optimism that their economic future will be better, but these low-wage workers over 50 don't really see much reason for optimism. They are more worried and concerned about achieving their life goals compared to the younger workers. And it's affected their view really of America. They are much less likely to believe that hard work can get you, can lead you to succeed in this country today than younger workers are. Debt is a particular challenge for low-wage workers. 48% of our respondents told us that they've had to borrow money to get by financially in recent times. 58% of all low-wage workers say that they worry about having more debt than they can handle. So about 6 out of 10 there. And that number, if you're in this 48% who's borrowed money, then that number who worry rises all the way to 73%. And they also see the debt not just something that's a source of anxiety and stress, but an obstacle to them moving ahead. This was interesting to me. I talked earlier about how the myth that low-income people aren't willing to work hard is rebutted by the survey. Another myth that's addressed here is the idea that low-income people are in some ways fiscally irresponsible, or that part of their reason they find themselves in this situation perhaps is they don't know how to manage money well. We asked a very interesting question here. We said, what would you do if we could wave a magic wand and raise your wages by $2 an hour tomorrow? What would you do with that extra income? Overwhelmingly, the thing they told us they would do is they would pay down debt. Not that they'd go take a vacation, not even improve food for their family, which in many cases would hardly be a luxury, but would just be a matter of providing better nutrition. Not buying a new car, but trying to pay down debt. So these are people who are desperately, just as they are working hard, they're desperately trying to be responsible about their financial situation, keep themselves out of debt or minimize it if they're in debt. The second item would save for retirement. But obviously at these incomes, these are very challenging things to achieve, managing and bringing down debt. We also see another important group is working mothers who face some distinct challenges, particularly in terms of trying to take the steps that would allow them to improve their situation and allow them to provide in a better way for their children. 51% of working mothers tell us that they have had to postpone education or training because they couldn't afford it. 40% say that lack of opportunities for education and training is a problem for them, and that the difficulty of affording that is an obstacle in reaching their goals. 47% of working moms say that compared to 35% of all low-wage workers. So here's a group that is particularly trying to improve their situation, not only for themselves, obviously, but also for their children, but who face some very serious hurdles in trying to do that. Getting to the end of the survey, we asked some low-wage workers, what are some things that could be done in terms of public policy that would make a difference to you and the people in the community where you live? Education and training, we've seen that the inability to access that is a huge barrier. Steps to make that more affordable and more available is hugely important to low-wage workers. The single highest rated item was the idea of partnerships between schools and employers to try to help young people find work when they graduate. A lot of interest in seeing public investment that would create jobs. That could be infrastructure or economic development, 80%, 75%. And about 8 in 10 say raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour would be a very important step in helping their community. And just to illustrate that last point finally, I wanted to show you some interesting differences between workers in our survey who make $10 an hour or more and those who earn less than 10. Now, we are not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that people who make between $10 and $14 an hour are well-paid or adequately paid workers, but still, the differences between being at that $10 an hour level or higher versus below are enormous. If you're below $10 an hour, 2/3 have relied on public assistance in the past 2 years. The number is only about 2/3 as high if you earn $10 or over. Dissatisfaction with personal financial situation, much higher. Do you have to spend half of your income on housing? 14 points higher if you're in that below the $10 an hour number, more likely to have to sell off or pawn your personal possessions just to survive economically. So I think this is a result we just showed as members of Congress yesterday, and I would hope every member of Congress would have a chance to see, to give you a sense of what a difference it could be to bring all of the low-wage workers up to at least to that $10 an hour level. So that's just a few pieces of data in a pretty rich survey. Oxfam has produced a very substantial report. I don't know if that's available out of the table. It is. Going through a lot more of the data here, but these are a few of the highlights that we thought were particularly significant.
Thank you, Guy. It's a wonderful survey, great data, sobering data about huge numbers of Americans who aren't doing well, Americans from all backgrounds. As Guy mentioned, our report, Oxfam's report, Hard Work, Hard Lives, is available if you haven't picked it up. But now I'd like to turn to Naya Potts and Tiffany Broyd, who are very pleased to have here today. Naya works at the area pizzeria and bar, which is a federal government contractor, and has been mentioned earlier today. Federal government contractors are the largest employer of low-wage workers in the U.S. 2 million low-wage workers working for government contractors, larger than the Walmarts, larger than the McDonald's. She works at the Ronald Reagan building here in D.C. and lives in Clinton, Maryland. And Tiffany Broyd, who works at the Walmart in Laurel, Maryland, and I understand was on CNN just earlier this week. So I would love to hear from both of you if some of the experiences, the problems, the issues described in our survey speak to your lives and other issues. Sure, whatever's.
Hi guys, thank you all for having me here today. My name is Naya Potts, as mentioned before, and I do work as a server at Aria Pizzeria, which is connected to the Reagan building. So I'm what's called a federally subcontracted worker. So I got involved in this campaign because I was re-entering the workforce as a new mom. I have a 1-year-old son at home, and I am newly separated, so I'm a single mom. I actually completed 4 years of college, but needed 1 more semester to finish. But in 2007, needed to leave school due to financial reasons to go and enter the workforce. So as 2007, at that point, that was right at the time when our economy was tanking. So I was, sort of walking right into that. And initially was able to get jobs, within my field, assistant teaching, doing therapy. But as the economic crisis got worse, those jobs disappeared for people like me who didn't have a diploma, even though I had attended college. So that's where I got, into having more menial jobs, like this job that I have now as a server. So re-entering the workforce as a mom, my first goal and intention was I'm going to, pay my back balance to school so that I can get myself back through school and in a better position to provide for myself and my son, which is now all on me. So I'm thinking this will work out great. I'm working as a server, there's this expectation that servers are going to make, a lot of money in tips and everything, so I'm thinking I'm going to be okay. And I walk into this situation that's not like that at all. For myself and most of the workers that I know, especially at my job, it costs about $8 a day to get to and from work on the metro. And then if you have to pay for childcare, it's about anywhere, if you have family helping you, $20 a day, $30 a day, in that sort of range. So you're paying to go to work. Well, if you go to work and you don't make a whole lot of tips, say, for instance, at my job, we make an average about $40 a day to $80, anywhere in that range. So that means that there are some days that I come home with literally $10 that I've made, that I've netted, after I, paid for childcare and things like that. And I was just really feeling like, wow, I'm really sinking into a really big hole here. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to save to, pay this back balance and get back to school. But more importantly, how do I get out of this situation, as a whole? How do I provide for my son to go to school, or, to be in the kind of schools that I would want him to be in through elementary and high school, not to mention him being able to go to college. So really, I just started to have I would have night terrors about this at one point, that, my child was not going to be able to go to college. I myself am a third-generation college student, so that to me is just, it was never something I thought about, never even crossed my mind that my child wouldn't be going to college, let alone me myself not be able to afford to go back. So, you know, just this growing frustration with this situation is what brought me into the campaign, finally meeting people like Good Jobs Nation who really heard that and understood that. At my job, there are 12 servers. I'm one of 12. So 12 of us all together. 9 of us are bilingual, including myself, which means that our ability to sell goods and make money for the restaurant is obviously increased, you know, exponentially by our ability to speak with people who come in and don't speak any English. Maybe they only speak Spanish. Maybe they only speak Amharic. And because we are there and we're bilingual, you know, the company is totally grossing on that and profiting on that, but we're not being paid for it. All of us are paid $3.50 an hour. And you know, to go through periods like we just went through, the government shutdown, for 2 weeks straight, we came into work and made nothing. We came into work and we're basically being told, you are worth $3.50 an hour. You're an American citizen, yes, but you are worth $3.50 an hour. And it would just make me sick to my stomach every day thinking that, you know what, someone in this building right now that we're working in is making exponentially more than what we are, and the value that they're placing on us is $3.50 an hour. This is nuts and it can't continue. So, you know, just as I got involved with the campaign more and learned more about the issues, I have heard a lot of people say, you know, make arguments on the other side for not raising minimum wage. Say things like, well, it's not going to help the economy. Things worse. It'll make things worse for you. And whether or not, I certainly don't advocate raising the minimum wage, you know, as this magic wand that's going to fix the economy and everything will be great again for everyone. But I think we need to look at raising the minimum wage as an issue that is separate from the economy. What we're talking about here is a human rights issue. It is inhumane to ask someone to come into work in this country for $3.50 an hour. It is inhumane to ask someone to serve food to people when they've made the decision that day not to eat so that they can get on the metro and make it all the way home. And for me and myself and my coworkers, this is a daily reality. It's something that has been drilled into us and ingrained into us, and at this point we don't even notice anymore. It's kind of like 4 o'clock rolls around and you go, oh, I didn't eat today, which, you know, for most people, especially on Capitol Hill, would be like a catastrophic crisis. When you add into that, you know, that our daily lives, this is, you know, everything that I'm saying to you now, this is just assuming that everything is going perfectly. You have your health, your car's doing great, whatever. But as you know, especially making less or so little money, things like your kids getting sick are much more likely to happen if you don't have health care. I have health care through Medicaid. I was, you know, forced into that situation because I have a 1-year-old, and it would be irresponsible of me as a parent to not make sure I did everything possible to get him health care. So we have Medicaid, thank God. But, you know, things like your child getting sick and not having sick days and vacation days and health benefits really puts a tremendous amount of stress on people. And I would, you know, say to those people on Capitol Hill who, you know, argue against this and argue against raising minimum wage and us having benefits, that, you know, let's trade paychecks for a month. And you just see what you would do with what I have. It's cold outside. Would you be able to clothe my son and feed him? Would you be able to, you know, make sure that he had everything that he needed with what I make? Because I'm sure, you know, with having your health care totally taken care of and knowing what your salary is going to be every single day, like there's just a level of stress that these people are not living with. It's not real to them. That is a daily reality for us, and we're saying no more. We live in America. I believe in America. I love the country that I live in. I love the fact that my grandparents were able to work to put themselves through college and make it and make better opportunities for my parents. But I don't have that opportunity now. That dream is way out of my grasp now, unless somebody does something immediately to stop it and to make the game fair again. Thank you guys so much.
Tiffany Berard. I'm 29 years old. I'm married. I'm from Louisiana, and I moved to Laurel, Maryland about 2.5 years ago. I'm employed by Walmart as a customer service manager. I made $12,000 last year, and I know you guys are wondering, how did I do that? I make $10.70 an hour. Some hours, sometimes I average 12 to 19 to 25 hours a week. That's at a full-time status. I wear many titles as a customer service manager for Walmart. I cashier, I cart push, I maintenance, I run the front end. I have a big title, I have huge responsibilities, all for low pay. Not only is my pay low, but me, myself, and other associates, we experience disrespect from market managers, store managers, our salary paid managers. They walk over us, tell us to do our tasks. They don't greet us. They never acknowledge our presence. They don't even simply ask how our day is going. When I was 7 months pregnant with the little one back there, today is her first birthday, by the way. When I was 7 months pregnant, my doctor suggested that I do light duty, and Walmart told me they didn't have any light duty work for me to do on my pay scale, so they forced me to take an unpaid leave. And it's kind of funny because that's when I started organizing, and I found out about the organization United for Respect, known as Our Walmart. And through that, I stumbled over another group of pregnant workers working for Walmart that was experiencing the same discrimination that I was. We also have really poor working conditions in Walmart, and it's sad because they're one of the largest retailers in a multi-billion-dollar company. Some of the things that we use on a daily basis are not in working condition, and it puts us at risk and in harm's way. Walmart also bully us as associates being paid low wages. And I like to use the term bully because people often think of bullies happening to school-age kids. Well, I'm here today testifying that Walmart do bully us as associates. They add in certain lying quotes into their policies, and they withdraw important information from us in their policies that benefits them and work against us. For instance, if I need a time off, I need to put in my request 3 weeks in advance because policy states that the schedule is put out every 3 weeks. Here we are, a week and a half to 2 weeks to Thanksgiving, and yet we have no schedule. This not only shows how Walmart is bullying us as low wages associates, but it also shows the lack of consideration that it has for myself and associates and their families across this country. Walmart also intimidates us from organizing and standing up and speaking out. Walmart also has retaliated against some of the people that stood up utilizing their federal rights. That's the question I often get from a lot of people is, am I scared of retaliation? Yes, I'm scared of retaliation. And then the following question they ask me is, well, why are you doing this, Tiffany? It's funny because I tell them, I said, I'm tired, I can't take no more, and I'm fed up, and I'm just going to stand here and let my voice be the voice of every associate across this country that's employed for Walmart, and let you know that the commercials you see on TV is not the real Walmart, that associates that are sleeping in their cars and homeless and living out of hotels with their families, that are relying on government assistance and going to food banks for their next meals for their family is the real Walmart. We suffer from stress and depression, of the lack of respect and low wages, the inconsideration, discrimination, retaliation. It's hard working at Walmart as a low-paid worker for a multi-million-dollar company and one of the largest retailers. And I was asked to come today to let you guys know what it's like working for Walmart. Well, that's what it's like working for Walmart on not only my behalf, but every associate across this country. And I've talked to many of them, and they all feel the same way I do. Some are experiencing these things, some are not, some have other issues, but all these issues are related, and that's why I decided to stand up and speak as one of the low-wage associates, because Walmart said they paid us $25,000 a year, which they did not. I'm a customer service manager, making $10.70 an hour, and they cut my hours so low per week that I only grossed $12,000 last year. And also, I ask that you guys as a community stand with us. As you know, we're doing an upcoming strike, just to stand with us and support. If you guys can do that for us, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Naya. Thank you, Tiffany. In addition to being so articulate, you are both very courageous. And before turning this over to the audience for a few minutes of questions, I'd like to ask you, how does one go about organizing people who are in jobs such as yours? One of the issues that has caused rising inequality in America, the spread of low-wage, has been the decline of labor unions. At the end of the 1950s, about a third of America's workforce was in labor union members. And those contractual wages spilled over to the rest of the economy. Today, just 9% of the private sector workforce are in unions. There have been efforts to organize workers such as you, but it's very difficult. How can workers, whether at Walmart, whether in a government contractor or other low-wage industries, organize and also sort of win the kind of public support that will kind of turn opinion, turn the views of our legislators?
It takes one courageous person to stand up and say they had enough and to start organizing, and then they'll bring more people on. But everyone is scared to organize. Even now at Walmart, we have more supporters in our stores than we have organizing. But as well as gaining the community and support is just going out and telling our stories and testifying what we're experiencing at Walmart, and just taking that extra step and just getting over the fear of retaliation. Because I mean, enough is enough. When you working and they treat us like that, they know that we can't afford to lose our job because we have bills. I mean, my rent is $1,300. If I stop working, then I don't have a place to stay for me and my two daughters, because I have two. So that means I have to organize. And the people at work, when I try to organize with them, there's some that's out and open, there's some that said, here's my number. I have people come up and just say, here's my number, can you give me a call? And I call them, and it's about organizing. It's very hard, but it can be done. It just takes that one person to stand up and say, hey, I've had enough.
I would agree completely. It's something we have to be very discreet, very cautious about, because your job is on the line. And in this climate today, people are very scared of just the word union. I mean, I remember even when I was being introduced to this campaign, I heard the word union and backed up myself and thought, no, I don't want anything to do with that, because unions get people fired. So really it's just educating people, letting them know these are our rights as workers. It's our right to strike. If they do retaliate against us because we are striking and organizing, that's against the law. It's immensely helpful to have campaigns behind us like Good Jobs Nation, who have lawyers and things like that. So when it gets hairy, we have somebody to fall back on and say, okay, they're trying to sort of back us into a corner here. Can you help us out and make sure that they sort of go hands off for a while? But you also have to be very careful if you're the kind of person that comes into work late and things like that. A lot of times that'll be fine for a while. You can be working your job for months like that. But the minute you start organizing, suddenly you're getting written up left and right because of these tardies or whatever. And you know that it's because you're part of this campaign and organizing in that way. As far as reaching leaders, I think really it's just what we're doing today, putting a human face on it and really just dispelling all of these myths about us all being teenage workers who just want, we're just trying to make money to get the new Jordans that came out or something, when she and I are good trying to provide for our children. So, yeah, education.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to open the questions up to the audience. For Naya, for Tiffany, for Guy, for Heidi. We've got maybe about 10 minutes for questions.
Question for Naya. Naya, as an employee who relies in large part on tips, what do you think of our system in America of tipping, where it's not just a symbolic gesture made by the customer, but something that is your bread and butter?
I think that there's definitely a lot of room for change. One thing too is that culturally, even within this country, people tip differently based on their economic status, based on their ethnicity, based on where they're from. The Ronald Reagan Building, especially, we have most of our customers, I guess, are, you know, from other countries and things like that. They're just visiting, and they don't know what our customs are here. So, you know, where our custom might be, you know, 15% is the standard, and then, you know, 20% or more if, you know, the service was really good. Well, you can be serving someone from Europe and giving them the best service ever, and they can tell that they're really appreciative of it. It's very nice, but when they leave the change from the dollar, you know, to sort of round out the dollar, you know, it's a sinking feeling of, you know, well, obviously we don't want to be handing them, you know, any literature on the proper way to tip in the U.S. when they come in, because you know, it's a whole other connotation to their meal and everything, but, you know, something needs to be done about that. And I've talked with a few other people about just raising the hourly wage for tipped workers, because really it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be on the American people to, you know, pay for my work. The company that I work for should pay for the hours that I'm working. And then if you make tips because you are a great employee and you're going above and beyond, that's how it should be, and not, you know, what you're dependent on.
Absolutely. Yes?
Thank you for the appreciate the words. Question for Tiffany. I want to know, what can we do to support the struggle against war? You know, how can we help organize it?
Just coming out to some of the events and actions that we have, you can help support us. We are having a strike. I have 2 organizers here with me. I think one is in the front and one is outside with my daughter. After this, you guys can get with them and they can let you know when and everything is, and you guys can definitely come out and show your support as community supporters with us.
Great organizer here, having the infrastructure right here in the room. Other questions? Yes.
First of all, you're both very brave for doing what you do, and I do appreciate and applaud you for that, because I'm sure this takes an incredible amount of courage and inner strength to do that, so thank you. I've worked with nonprofit, and I'm wondering, what do you think nonprofit world could do to support what you guys need while we're waiting for change to come on the other end?
Really, the more groups like yours that come together and stand with us, the better. Like, we've worked with Walmart before when they have events and things like that, because really it's about numbers and the impact that we can make, and it's about getting the rest of the country to look and pay attention to this particular issue at this time when there's so much going on. So exactly what Tiffany was saying before, I was about to call you Lindsay. Tiffany was saying before about just standing with us, you know, when we have events and things like that. The bigger that we can make them, and the using your networks and things like that of people that you all know that maybe we're not in touch with, makes a huge impact on you know, the kind of difference that we can make, and really highlighting these issues and making it, you know, top priority in Washington.
I pretty much agree with her with what she's saying, and also it's just spreading the message and our name and our word, and just letting them know what we stand for would be a great support as well. Just telling them that our Walmart is an organization united for respect.
Other questions?
For Naya, I guess, what are some of the policy changes that can help out federally subcontractors?
Well, as far as federal subcontractors, there's actually a bill right now, or an executive order that could be signed right now by President Obama. Basically, it used to be that federally subcontracted workers were paid a lot more in federal buildings, because as you would think, you know, the government should be the leader in treating workers fairly. And then sometime around Reagan's time period in office, that was taken away. And so now, you know, you have people working in the Reagan building who in some cases were working below the federal minimum wage. Tipped workers are not. So having that executive order being signed again, which would significantly raise the hourly rate for federally subcontracted workers, would be amazing. That's a quick fix right now for a small group of people in that, well, not even 2 million workers, but, you know, as far as the nation is concerned, it is a small piece of the pie. And then, you know, that would be a huge win for us as far as, you know, the overall minimum wage raising push. You know, for us to have that victory would be a huge example to the rest of the country, and privately owned companies like Walmart and things like that, who, you know, also need to give workers what they deserve. We have your respect, put it in the chat.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that the federal government was the largest employer of workers. Why, I don't know, but in addition to what you're suggesting as far as the legislation, is there any way that you can also petition the government to provide you with assistance in getting training, upgrade training, so that you not only can realize a better wage in where you're working, but you're also having an opportunity to get assistance in getting training or education that will help you improve your skills and therefore qualify and hopefully secure jobs paying a decent wage, particularly those that are career related. I worked for workforce development programs a very long time ago, more than what I'll admit. But one of the things we were always doing is, yes, get a person a job regardless of the wage. It's an entry-level job, but also put that person in the position where after they get the work experience, they're also getting an opportunity to get educated and trained so that they can move into jobs paying a higher wage. And I really think that the federal government is subsidized, paying your salary at that unconscionable wage. They should also be trying to prepare you for jobs paying decent wages.
Just a quick point of correction, it's not the federal government, but contractors to the federal government indirectly.
They should require,
Absolutely.
Some way they have some, should have some control over that.
Absolutely, as Naya mentioned, an executive order could.
Right, and having the government require that those contractors that they deal with, because, you know, they can pick and choose who gets that contract. You know, that can be something that's on the table before they even receive the money, you know, to be able to be in these federal buildings. You're not going to treat your workers fairly, and you don't have a plan for how to train them, or, you know, to have a higher, I guess, level of worker within your company there, then we're not going to give you this contract. I mean, that's the obvious answer, I guess. It's really up to the government to be more conscionable about who they are allowing to have these contracts and treating the workers.
I guess we have time for one last question. Yes, thanks.
So logically, to get the policies that you have to elect the people that agree with those policies. What are you guys doing in terms of like your organization efforts to get people to vote? People that currently aren't voting, especially people that would benefit by voting a certain way. So essentially, they're voting for their own interests because there's a lot of voter apathy out there, and that seems like a huge opportunity. So how are you guys integrating, I guess, voting with your organization efforts?
Right. Well, people like Keith Ellison, who has been amazing help to our campaign, really sort of show you the stark difference between people who are on this issue and who really care about it and those that don't. And we do a lot of lobbying, like we're lobby days will go into the Senate and to Congress and just stop by people's offices, sort of hey, this is where we are on this issue. We'd like you to get on board with us as well. And you get to kind of feel people out. Usually going into it, we know what side of the issue is based on voting records and things like that. But when you're talking about the community, when we come out of these lobby days and bringing that information to the community of what we've learned and things like that, that's where it gets really important. Where you're able to show people the differences between different candidates, different parties and things like that, and where you want to keep it as bipartisan as possible. And there certainly are people on the right who do support what we're doing, like you saw today. It's important for people to know, especially here in this area, who's who and what's what. So we try to keep current, I guess, with that, and who's really helping us out. Put a name and a face with the DC Councilwoman Eleanor, and I can't remember her last name. Holmes Norton, yes, I'm sorry, Eleanor Holmes Norton is somebody who spoke up on our behalf several times, so we know exactly where she stands on that issue. Because she's in our corner fighting for us. So really right now it's kind of put up or shut up as far as our message to our representatives right now.
Kind of like what she said, just put up or shut up, because it's kind of funny because we have a lot of people that come out to our actions and speak and just tell their point of view, and we just kind of just go from there, what do we feel is right to vote for?
Well, thank you. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists, Naya, Tiffany, Guy, Heidi, our members of Congress in absentia, EPI for hosting us, Christian Dorsey in particular for making this event possible, and for all of you to come out today. And I hope you follow all of our work going forward, Oxfam, CPIs, and the work of the organizations of these two courageous women. Thank you.